Hi friends, welcome to English Study Point. Today here in this video lecture, I am going to discuss with you about African literature. So here African literature means literature of as well as from Africa. Now let me explain this in Hindi. Of का मतलब होता है में, यानी जो लिटरेचर अफ्रीका में प्रोड्यूस हुई दैट इज़ कॉल्ड एन अफ्रीकन लिटरेचर. नाउ फ्रॉम का मतलब है से का यहाँ पर मतलब है जो लिटरेचर अफ्रीका से आई एंड उस लिटरेचर के आइडियाज़ अलग अलग पार्ट्स में कंट्री के अलग अलग पार्ट्स में डिफ्यूज़ होने लगे. सो दैट इज़ ऑल्सो कॉल्ड एज अफ्रीकन एज एन अफ्रीकन लिटरेचर. Now I am discussing about history of African literature. So here African literature, trend of African literature started not really as a form of written literature first. It first started as an oral literature, means when works composed in African languages, so those works can be passed on from one generation to another orally. So this is how African literatures first started with an oral literature. And this oral literature, this word can be known to us by some other word also, and that word is orature. This term was coined by Ugandan scholar whose name is Pio Zirimu, and there was an author whose name is George Joseph. He wrote one book, and that work is Understanding Contemporary Africa, in which he tries to make highlight readers dichotomy, means that he tries to insist readers or makes readers realize that there is a huge dichotomy between literatures produced in African as well as European languages, or way of writing literatures of both these kind of countries is totally different. Because while writing European literatures, European authors try to put so much emphasis on separating art from content. Because while writing content for producing literature, we have to choose subject matter first, and on the basis of that subject matter, we write content for producing literature. And when we write content, so we used to incorporate so many interferences along with that content we are writing for producing literature. And they emphasize that art should only be meant for the sake of art. It should be devoid of any kind of interferences such as political, social, economic as well as cultural. So these kind of interferences when merged with the content writing, so this can be so much unjust happened with that of art. So that is why they make emphasize or put so much emphasis on separation of art from content. And then African literature is totally different from European literature, because while writing African literature, African authors try to put so much emphasis on combining art with content. So, for African authors, art is equally essential along with writing content, because they think that when we write content, so we used to incorporate so many interferences while writing that content, and it will make their work more beautiful if they add social, political, economic as well as cultural influences in that particular work. So that is why African literature or literature produced is in Africa is totally different from that of European literature. Now Africans write for the purpose of beauty. So major purpose of writing by Africans is because they write for beauty. Here beauty means the literary beauty. So whenever they used to write works, so they make presence of such kind of ideas in which they try to intertwine sensations. So while conveying ideas, they also try to put feelings while conveying ideas, and this is how they try to make their works beautiful. And when they try to make their works beautiful, so they take inspiration from oral literature. So that is why major purpose of their writing as well as singing this singing, this word is used in the context of oral literature. So they used to sing, and when they used to sing, they try to convey their feelings from one generation to another. So in this context, singing is written here. And what is the purpose, or what is their purpose? So Africans write as well as sing for the purpose of giving importance to this beauty. Means beauty here means literary beauty, for which they take inspiration from, again from oral literature. Then why Africans use beauty? And first as well as sole purpose of using beauty in their works is because they want to tell truths as well as inform to the society about their experiences, whether those experiences are worse for them as well as whether those experiences are good for them. So they talk about all these experiences and inform to different societies about their experiences. So that is why they use beauty in their works, because they want to tell truth as well as inform to the society. Then they find beauty in objects. Also we see that Africans also perceive beauty, or they see beauty in each kind of objects, because these kind of objects provide them ideas for writing. So that is why they see beauty in each and every object. Now here I am describing about African literature consists of traditional oral as well as written literature in Afro-Asiatic language. Afro-Asiatic language is a language which comprises of nearly 300 languages and which is spoken in Western Asia, Northern Africa as well as few parts of Sahara. And also we see that African languages and people who are Africans and used to write in European languages, so these all may forms part of African literature or comprises of African literature. Now I am telling you about who writes this traditional literature. So people who are restricted to a smaller region, so these people used to write traditional literature. And also I am telling you about oral literature. So this kind of literature is written by people who belongs from sub-Saharan culture of Africa. So this kind of culture consists of people of diverse religious beliefs, and here comes African traditional religion as well as Christianity and Islam. So this region is dominated by Christianity as well as Islam, and also contains people of diverse religious beliefs. So they used to tell their stories by passing it from one generation to another. Now again I am telling you about traditional African written literature is written by scholars as well as Nigerian scholars and also people belonging from Somal. So they used to write written literature which is traditional and also written in Ge'ez as well as Amharic language. So these are two languages of Ethiopia and forms part of Africa. And here in this place, Christianity is practiced for a long span of time, and they also used to write traditional African written literature. Now I am talking about South African literature. It consists of people from South Africa who writes in English as well as Afrikaans language, and then comes the turn of modern African literature. So this literature is again produced by people belonging from South Africa who drew Europe as their model of inspiration, and on the basis of Europe as their model, they try to produce work based on these models rather than following existing African traditions. And above all, African oral traditions try to put a strong influence on all these literatures which is written in different span. Now I am describing about African oral literature in detail. So this literature is written in prose as well as verse form, and now I am also again talking about subject matter which is which through which they try to talk about or deliver their tales. So they used to talk about mythological as well as historical things while telling their tales in oral literature. And also these mythological as well as historical tales includes trickster tales. So trickster tale is a kind of tale in which they try to showcase small animal creatures who with the use of their wit here means intelligence, who by using intelligence they try to encounter larger animal creatures, and thus they are able to survive with their use of wit, because actually region is predominated by larger creatures. So that is why, in order to confront with them, these smaller creatures try to use wit as well as their intelligence to battle with the stronger force, or the people who try to hegemonize their religion or dominated their region. So that is why they use wit in order to survive in the society of those which is dominated by these larger creatures. Now I am talking about that these storytellers in Africa uses call and response techniques. So call and response techniques is a form of interaction between a speaker as well as an audience, in which speaker tries to make statements and response of those statements given by listeners who are listening their poetry. So this is a kind of technique which is described as call and response techniques, and this is used to tell up stories to the audience, and audience in return try to give responses to the speaker on the basis of their listening. Then poetry often sung includes, so these are kinds of poetry which is sung as a form of oral literature, and that keeps on passing on from one uh, generation to another generation, and this may include narrative epic, occupational, ritual verse, and also these poetry try to admire rulers who perform heroic deeds in their past, and also they used to praise singers as well as bards. Bards are somewhat intelligent kind of poets who possess tremendous knowledge, and they are also known as griots. They used to tell their stories with music, and also they recite poetry, and after reciting they used to sing poetry about love songs, work songs, as well as children's songs, and also they use epigrams. So epigrams is a kind of brief poetry or concise form of poetry which is very interesting. Memorable statements are presented here in this use of epigrams, and also these kind of poetries are very satirical in nature. So epigrams are a kind of concise poetry which is satirical, and they are interesting and contains memorable statements. Also there is use of proverbs and riddles of so many kinds. An oral tradition exists in many languages, in many African languages such as Fula, Swahili, Hausa, and Wolof. Then I am again dividing African literature into pre colonial literature, then colonial literature, then afterwards post colonial literature. So in Ethiopia, substantial literature written in Ge'ez around 4th century AD, and best known work produced in pre colonial literature is Kabra Negast or Book of Kings, and popular form of traditional African folk tales is trickster story, in which there is a presentation of small animals, and they with use of their wits here means intelligence, they used to encounter larger creatures, and while encountering with them they are able to survive in the region which is fully dominated by larger creatures. So this is how trickster story is used in the era of pre-colonial literature, which is before colonialism. So that literature is described as pre-colonial literature, and under this literature one remarkable work is produced, and that is Kebra Nigast, which is in English is known as Book of Kings. Then in colonial African literature, when African people turn on to explore themselves, or they try to explore western languages, so they begin to write about their experiences using these western languages. So this is how what comprises of colonial African literature. Then in 1911 we see that there is an author whose name is Joseph Ephraim Kingsley Hayford, also known as Ikra Agiman. He belongs from Ghana, and he published first African novel which is in written in English language, and that work is Ethiopia Unbound semicolon Studies in Race Emancipation. So this work again oscillates between fiction as well as political advocacy, and after publication of this work which is in English, so this try to put a turning point in African literature. So after publication of this work, which is by Ikra Agiman, so there we see that there is a beginning of turning point in African literature after publication of this work. Then we see that literatures produced in late colonial period, they try to make works based on themes of liberation as well as independence. Then there is a leader whose name is Leopold Sedar Senghor, and he was a leader of the negritude movement. He published in the year 1948 first anthology of French language poetry. So here we see that Africans, despite using African language, they are getting influence from Western languages, and also they are using Western languages while creating their works. So here we see that Leopold Sedar Senghor, who himself is an African, so he tried to publish his work, which is first anthology of French language poetry, and that poetry is title of that poetry is Anthologie de la Nouvelle Poissengre at Malgache de langue française. So this is name of poetry written by Leopold Sedar Senghor. And also we see here that western region, these Africans became popular due to colonization as well as slave trade, and on the basis of all these colonization as well as slave trade, slave narratives written by Olodha Equiano's The Interesting Narrative. So Olodha Equiano wrote The Interesting Narrative in the year 1789. So this is how African literature or African history becomes a major part of literature, and its ideas kept on diffusing in different countries. Then I am describing about features related to post-colonial African literature. So here we see that many African nations gained independence during this time, and people in this period started writing in Western languages as well as in their traditional African languages, and works which they used to write. So they set different kinds of themes, and primarily they use these seven themes while writing their works. So their works mainly based on these all seven predominant themes, and upon all these themes their works revolve around. And also we see that there are other major themes that is used by African writers during this time. So they used to depict social problems such as corruption as well as economic disparities which they used to face while living in a newly independent country. And also they used to talk about rights as well as roles of women living in newly independent countries. And also we see that African female writers are better presented in this contemporary scenario as compared to the time before independence. Then we see that in 1986, Wol Soyinka became the first post independence African writer to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. So here we see achievements of African people, African writers. So these are achievements of African writers after forming or after writing their literature. So in 1986, Wol Soyinka win the Nobel Prize in Literature, and again Algerian-born Albert Camus has been awarded the prize in 1957. So this is all about history of African literature. And here with this video lecture ends here. Hope this video lecture will help you in your UGC NET English literature exams. Thank you.